You're listening to Radio Primavera Sound, proudly presented by Cupra.
Hello, my guest on Line Noise this week is Kirk Degiorgio, a British producer, perhaps better known as One, who's been in electronic music for more than 30 years, occupying a territory somewhere between Detroit techno, home listening, funk, soul, and jazz. We spoke about his classic As One album, Reflections, which Barcelona label Lapsus is reissuing for its 30th anniversary. We spoke about giving up DJing, arguments with Warp, Detroit, Mo Wax, and more. I really hope you enjoy it. And do go and get that Reflections reissue. Obviously, like one of the reasons we're speaking is because it's the 30th anniversary of Reflections.
Yep.
How does it feel to celebrate like a 30th anniversary?
Well, I'm never one to really look back on my early material, but I do appreciate when labels want to introduce it to a new generation. Maybe it really helps me find new listeners, I guess, because I'm always releasing new material. So even though I don't look back on my past material, I think it helps bring it all together as a whole, bring my old material, my new material together for a new audience, which is something I'm always looking out for and think it's important, not just to keep it within your bubble of fans, but to reach out and try and reach some new listeners.
So even if you're reissuing something, you won't even go back to have a listen to it. It's just like, well, I know it's there.
I just check the masters, the pre-masters, when I send them to make sure they haven't deteriorated or developed any sort of digital glitches. But then, no, I don't listen to them, no.
Do you still think of techno as a future music?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, there's some of it that is almost retro, I guess, a nostalgia, because it's been, like you say, 30 years for my tracks. I think some of the new techno material is still very futuristic sounding, especially some of the more abstract, harder club techno is very futuristic still, sort of working in non-traditional scales and experimenting with sound design, and also the technology to make the music in terms of the amount of tools we have available today is, you could only have dreamt of 30 years ago when I made Reflections. And I think the combination of the equipment available and the new technology we have to share the music, I do think techno is still a very futuristic music. Because
is your machine, the Club Night, is that still going? I think the last one I saw advertised was last summer, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware, but I had a health issue, complicated. Yeah, I had COVID really bad, really early on. And ever since I had COVID, I just assumed it was this long COVID that everyone was talking about. I felt very fatigued a lot of the time, but I carried on as normal. But then I went into hospital for kidney stone pain, something completely unrelated. And they found out that my heartbeat was dangerously low. And it turns out that in all likelihood, that bout of COVID damaged the lower chamber of my heart to such an extent that my heart rate was half what it should be. And so I had a pacemaker fitted, which is very unusual for someone my age, quite young. But they said it was low enough to, to merit one. And I don't know if you know much about pacemakers. I mean, that most people go about their lives without it impacting them at all, but they rely on, electromagnetic fields can interfere with the electronics. So I had to give up DJing because you can't wear headphones and you can't be around huge monitors and speaker stacks. You have to keep a good meter or 2 meters away from huge magnets. So I left machine with Ben Sims, I gave him my blessing to carry on the parties. I don't know what's happening with that now. Maybe he feels a bit reluctant now I'm no longer involved. I don't know that at all, actually. Maybe they are still continuing, but they're probably, now I'm not involved, they're probably less often.
So, I'm sorry to hear you've been having health problems.
All right now.
No, I did. I remembered reading an article, basically, I guess last year, saying that you were giving up DJing. I only just remembered it when you said it. About the pacemaker.
Just club DJing. I mean, I can keep a distance from my monitors here in the studio, and the microphone I have to keep a meter away. I've checked it all out, and I've had the pacemaker for over 6 months now, and everything's fine. So I can work in the studio, and I can also do my radio shows. It's just a club festival environment when you're having to, many a time I've had to squeeze into the DJ booth and rub up against huge speakers, and the last place you want to be is in a festival and your heart, your pacemaker stopped working. So it's just a change I have to live with and come to terms with. So
what I was going to ask about Machine, which I suppose does still make sense. I mean, I know you're not doing it, but that was a club night that only played music that was under a year old.
Yeah.
That was a very bold move. And when I was talking about whether techno is still future music, I mean, that kind of strikes me as like a way of saying it is, a way of keeping it kind of futuristic, right?
Yeah, the motivation for that was in 2011. I was DJing a lot more than I used to, and I was the only one I seemed to hear on the lineup who was playing new music. Everything else was, it seemed the crowd were just waiting for someone to play Strings of Life for the thousandth time, or the Bells, and I was just getting really bored. And there was so much good music out there that I approached Ben Sims, who obviously had probably a bigger club following than I did around the world at that time. And I thought to get someone like him behind that concept as well as just me would hopefully work. And it really did. We got to the point where it almost became, well, we didn't advertise it anymore as a club that played new music because everyone adopted it. And without wishing to claim it was us on our own, but I really do think we had an impact on that. And the days of just hearing, Good Life and the crowd going crazy and then it being boring for the next sort of few hours were gone, and everyone was into new music. And I also thought that opened the door for a lot more of the live performances where people could just jam and just test out new material or completely improvise. So yeah, that might be grand sort of claims, but I really do think Machine had a huge impact.
Do you miss club DJing, by the way?
Well, it's only been 6 months, but I do. I used to absolutely love it. There was nothing better than doing those Machine parties. So yeah, of course.
Going back to Reflections, which obviously released under the name As One, as a lot of your music was.
Yeah.
Would it be sort of fair to say that the As One productions were intended for home listening, at least in part?
Yeah, they originally, it was because I guess my first EP was on B12, and I wanted a way to differentiate the harder side of techno, which I loved, and the more melodic. So that was from the very start. Future Past was for the club material, and As One was for the more sort of down tempo home listening. I've broken the rules, it's not hard and fast, but it was quite helpful at the time because R&S were more interested in my Future Past material, so I could sign to them. And New Electronica were more interested in my As One, so you could sign to different labels as well and keep it all separate.
I mean, obviously you were recording for B12's label, and you were friends with Plaid as well, I believe. Did you ever sort of speak to Warp about recording for them under the sort of Artificial Intelligence series?
I had a disastrous meeting with Warp where they were signing everyone, basically, and Yeah, I don't know how, but the meeting got into the realms of the origins of techno and my inspirations. And I am from a black music background, soul, funk, disco, and they, how can I put this? I couldn't believe it. They were quite aggressively against that. And I remember the guy's exact words were, techno's not just another form of disco. You know, this music comes from Depeche Mode and Human League, and it turned into an argument, and we just, you know, fell out immediately. There, you know, there was a vibe that was lost in the meeting. I just sort of said, well, I'm sorry, but, you know, for me, this is a continuation, another black music art form that came from, you know, Detroit with Chicago house influences, which is pure disco. And of course, there's that element of, you know, European music. The Detroit people always, you know, were fans of Kraftwerk and bands like that. But ultimately, you know, this isn't a new type of music for me. I've been into, you know, electronic music from black artists for decades, and they really seem to go against that. So I don't know why. It's all water under the bridge now, but the relationship has never been good since. To be honest, I've tried to license the original ART EPs, but because they've got Warp Plaid signed the rights over to Warp, and yeah, they've never allowed me to reissue them. So yeah, it's not good, but I don't know. That was a big thing around that time.
Yeah.
There was a big sort of, you know, the enemy and such getting involved and jumping on this thing as a whole new sort of brand new revolution in music. Whereas, you know, for some of us, well, no, you know, we'd gone through that more, I would say, with the electro genre, which really did split people in the black music world. You know, soul fans, purists really didn't like it, and we jumped on it. So,
well, I'm interested in that because you said in an interview once that you were one of a small number of soul boys who didn't see Detroit techno as an aberration.
Yeah, it was just a continuation because we knew some of the names as well. You know, I saw, you know, some of the techno that was coming out of Detroit, and immediately saw, you know, someone's name who I'd been buying records from 1983, you know, Warren Atkins, and you know, and then you work back, and there was all sorts of earlier electronic dance tracks, things that were later on sampled in some techno records, things like Electric Funk, On a Journey, on, you know, on Prelude. Some of Francois Kevorkian's mixes were incredibly techno in the way they approached, which sound like dub techno to this day, the way they treated some of them. And even going further back, tracks like Space Base by Slick, it's just pure Afrofuturism. So for us, techno was just, you know, Detroit techno was just another continuation of that innovation of Black American music.
Why do you think, though, so many, well, other soul boys saw it as a terrible thing? And you...
Yeah, well, that's just the purism, you know. It's never a good thing in any genre, really, I don't think. And yeah, like I said, though, it wasn't as the animosity from the purist soul crowd wasn't as great towards techno as it was towards electro. And in fact, some of the biggest Northern soul fans were the biggest advocates for house and techno. I'm thinking specifically of Neil Rushton and the Network label. So yeah, it wasn't as big a split as it was in electro. I mean, the soul DJs at the time just refused to play electro. They absolutely hated it.
Getting back to Reflections, I believe film was really important to it, right?
Probably at that time, yeah. I'm always influenced by other cultural aspects that, especially books. But yeah, in those days, probably film as well. Yeah.
And also, there's a lot of the track names refer to specific places.
Yeah. Travel, just the usual thing. I was very young, sort of. I was only about 22, 23, maybe a bit older during the making of most of that album. So I was always reading about places, and that probably had a big influence on some of my, the imagination that I had when I listened to the tracks.
Would it always be a case of the title coming later, or would you ever? Right. Okay. So it was like, okay, it wouldn't be like, okay, I wonder what this place.
No,
is.
I'm not. I'm not a musician, so if I get an emotion or a feeling, I wouldn't know how to put that down. I'm very technical when it comes to music, so I will just get into a zone and then assign a title, to whatever came subliminally out of my subconscious, sort of fit it to a sound. So, I couldn't, think of an exotic place and then make a track that reminded me of that.
You talk about being technical. I read in an interview that you used to spend a lot of time reading the manuals for drum machines. I know there are lots of producers who say they never read them. It's just get the drum machine and start playing with it. Well, for a start, do you think that's true? And for a second, like, why do you prefer to read them?
I think everyone's got different approaches. Some people are just not non-technical. They just, their mind just switches off. They're more like a musician. They would just, you put something in front of them and they'll make music out of it. Whereas I'm not really gifted in that way. I'm more, like I say, I'm more technical. I've never grown up playing a musical instrument. I still can't play a musical instrument. I have to work on, if I do a solo and something, I have to work on it and then maybe edit it up afterwards. I'm just, it's just a completely different part of the brain, I think, that works like that. So a drum machine, I'd probably know how to do the basics, especially now that I've learned. But at the time, I did have to learn everything from scratch. I wasn't one of those teenagers who, my parents could buy me a synth or a drum machine. Like some of my, people I know grew up like that. I didn't have anything like that at all. I just collected records from the age of 11, saved up every bit of pocket money or dinner money. And so I was a collector of music. From a very, very early age, I was just absolutely obsessed with black music from the age of 11. And I had a collection, by the time I was 13, 14, I had a collection that, most people in their 20s and 30s now wouldn't even know what half of it was. So I was lucky in that aspect, that I just had an obsession and I really rolled with it.
And then you sold your records to buy music making equipment.
Most of it, yeah. I exaggerated that a bit. I sold most of it. I had lots and lots of original, like Blue Note recordings that were worth a lot of money, and some of them were quite sort of straight jazz. So I sold most of those and got a few grand together. It was only a couple of grand, it wasn't anything huge. Just enabled me to buy the latest Roland R8 drum machine, Akai S950 sampler, a Fostex 8-channel mixer, and a DAT machine to record it all on. What else? And just a master keyboard, a Roland D5. I then got an 808 very quickly from second-hand shop. Some good speakers. Yeah, it was about between 2 and 3 grand, I guess.
Didn't that kill you though, as a record collector since the age of 12 or 11?
Working in a record shop, so I just thought, I'll be able to get these back. They're rare, but that's what I dealt in at the time.
Yeah.
Record dealers who I could, once I started release, I had pretty much a hit with my first record, so I could then easily buy those records back. And by that time, they were coming out on Japanese CDs, so the sound quality was even better than the vinyl. So, you know.
You said that you're not a musician, and I mean, I get the impression you're being, modest about it. But I wanted to ask, you've been making music and very good music for more than 30 years. So what are you good at within music? What do you think is like you're really
Harmony?
Sorry,
Harmony. Yeah, that's what everyone says. The musicians, classically trained musicians, very good musicians like Jimpster, Ski Oakenfold, people who can actually play, Ian O'Brien, and they listen to my tracks and go, how the hell have you come up with those chords? That's just next level. And I'm like, I don't know. So it's obviously I've got the ear for harmony, but they've tried to reverse engineer them and say, some of the chord progressions I've come up with as a trained musician, you just wouldn't think of them because a lot of it is muscle memory and what you've learned with theory and leading notes going into that. I just break all the rules because I don't know what I'm doing. I just do what I hear and sounds good. And I have studied the theory. I know what I am doing theory wise. It's just at my age, it's just ridiculous to try and start having lessons, but I can find my way around the keyboard now, but for years I didn't have a clue.
Practically, how would you write a melody? Is it literally a case of sitting at the keyboard and hitting keys until it sounds good, or
no? One of the best ways is to vocalize melodies. I don't know if you know, but As One is a duo now with myself and my wife, Catherine.
No.
Yeah, for the last 2 albums, it's been, for the last album, and then we've just finished the next album. Catherine, my wife, Catherine Prendergast, and she's just incredible at melodies, and my harmony and her melody seem to go together, and I don't know how she does it. She just comes up with, she'll just sit in front of a keyboard. It doesn't matter what sound she's got. She'll just come up with a melody, whereas I sing them and then find the notes, pick the notes out. That's the best way for me to do melodies. But I think everyone's got their different way. Some people are more technical with their melodies and will follow, what's going on in the chord progression and stuff like that. But no, I tend to find singing them helps.
I love the idea of husband and wife musical duos, and I'm kind of fascinated by how they work. I mean, is it because I suppose can you just say, for example, if Catherine does something you don't like, you know each other well enough that you can say, no, I don't like that? Or do you find you have to be more careful because, she's your wife and
it's brutal with me. And it's usually something she doesn't like that I've done that, I don't know. If you listen to the last album and when the next album comes out, you'll hear it's the melodies are more up front. Whereas the tracks before, sometimes the hook was the chord changes, and she's just added these melodies, and it worked the same way when I did the Beauty Room project. My co-writer in the Beauty Room, Gennady, he is a musician, and it worked the same way as well. He would do the melodies on top of my harmony, and if you work with someone that comes up with melody, it's a real sort of bonus, and that's the way with me. Whereas with Catherine, it'll be more, change that sound or change this sound. With her, I really don't like anything she does. So, and if I do, it's something very basic, like, can I change the sound? And she's like, well, I'm just using the sound to get the melody. You can do whatever you want with the sound, and then I'll do the technical stuff. So, that's how it works, and it really works well like that.
And who has the final word then?
We both do, because often, I'll sit there for hours mixing, and it's just great having a fresh pair of ears. And she'll come in and take a really good listen to everything, live with it for a while, and she'll be really good at being that second pair of ears and even spotting things like the levels of the hi-hats are too loud, or this and that. So Yeah, it does work really well, actually.
So one thing I didn't know about you until quite recently was you've written quite a lot about music too.
Mm.
In fact, I think I might be wrong. I came across a piece you did for Resident Advisor about LFO. Was that you?
Yeah, I did a series for Resident Advisor called God, what was it called? I can't. A retro pick of the week kind of thing. It was. Yeah, they were doing reviews, and they wanted a classic review, and I did a series for them. I did about 10 or 12 probably, and that was really good. So going and interviewing the remaining member of LFO and getting the backstory. And it was one of those things where, they allowed me to go really deep into it, deeper than most would. They were quite long. Often they would be twice as long, and they'd edit them all down. But yeah, it was really something that I really enjoyed doing. I don't know if it's still going. Actually, they haven't asked me for a while. But again, that was something I'm completely self-taught. My grammar's not great, so again, working with an editor really helps. But I've got the knowledge, so it's a bit similar to my music making, really.
No, I thought the LFO one was really great. I came across it. I think doing some research. I was like, oh, it's really good. You once recorded for Mo Wax.
Yeah.
And that's sort of iconic label, run by James Lavelle, who's sort of a fascinating character, I think.
Yeah.
Did you see the film about him, The Man from Mo Wax?
No, God, deliberately. I mean, I know James well enough to not want to see a film, because I can't understand some of the negativity he's got. When my dealings with him were purely, he loved music and he was so enthusiastic, and he fought tooth and nail with major label who had brought Moex up to allow us the total creative freedom. And I've just got nothing but positive things to say about James. I didn't want to see a film. I just want to remember him the way that I used to remember him. I was living in London at that time. I'd always pop in his office any time of day, and we'd just chat about music and just go nuts about jazz and techno being combined and all this stuff. And then he went on to do other stuff, and he went into a sort of more indie world, and that's not something I'm particularly interested in. So I just I just want my memories to be of the good old days, and when I see him, we still, hug each other, and it's all great. So,
no, I think he comes across well in the documentary. It's certainly not like anything bad about him. I think it's like it's a while since I saw it, but if I remember, he does reflect on difficult times in his life and kind of creative partnerships he had that no longer work. But generally, it kind of I think he came across.
It's more the sort of, not that I doubt if he'd let it come out if it was negative, but it's more the sort of musical direction and the associations he got in with music that's not really my kind of thing, and I love the producer. Matthew Puffer is another good friend who worked with James on a lot of stuff. I love his stuff. That's more my kind of thing. And I've got that kind of my nice memories, and I just, want to remember Mo Wax and James like that.
Talking of strong characters, your label released early music by Aphex Twin, for example, among many others. What was he like to work with?
I didn't have much contact. I've only met Richard a couple of times. He's a really lovely guy. Again, just someone who you could tell was absolutely obsessed with music, just wanted to talk about music and computers, a bit of a geek. But it was very early on, and I still love his music. I think he's incredible at what he does, but didn't really have much dealings with him. I think it's a shame that whole fan base sort of thing is so, I don't know, it seems so toxic. a lot of his fan base. I really don't want to get involved again. I just play the music and don't worry about, you know, silly arguments about whether he said this or that in the media that turned out to be rubbish. I don't care. You know, he's a great publicist. You know, it's all part of his persona, and it's, you know, it's all brilliant. So, you know, good for him. And I don't really take much notice of the other stuff.
Another thing I didn't know that you did was you composed music for adverts. Are you still doing that?
No, I wish I did. It was quite lucrative at the time. That world kind of lasted for a good few years, but you know, since the sort of advent of digital music, that kind of declined as well. Haven't done that for a while. It's quite hard. You have to be very lucky to get into that world, and I did have a contact in that world that got me in there for a good few years. That was really good, enabled me to fund my other music, my sort of stranger music, and yeah, it was good, but it's hard work because you're essentially dealing with creatives who don't really understand the way music works most of the time. Most of them didn't have a clue, and they'd ask you to sort of, you know, they'd only go by what they knew, so they'd ask you to mash up, you know, various artists that they like the sound of, and like, you really can't mix Cuban music with Metallica, or you could, but it would sound pretty weird. Or a lot of the time they just give you a track by the Chemical Brothers or Bjork and say, can you copy this, but copy it in a way that we don't, you know, get too close. And I always rejected those because it's not musically interesting to me, even though, you know, financially it would have been good. Just not my thing, really. So no, it was really good when you got one where you got a creative who just trusted you and said, you know, we like what you've done, just go with it, have complete creative freedom. That's when it worked really well.
Well, I was going to say the Adidas advert you did with Prince Nassim, it's basically techno, like pretty avant-garde techno. You kind of smuggled onto this vast, you know.
Well, that's one of the examples, you know, where I think a lot of the others were tracks, they'd picked tracks that I'd already had. But that one was the Douglas brothers, I think, produced and directed that. And yeah, we had complete creative freedom with the music. It was one of the things where they knew we knew what we were doing. They had you know, a brief as to the kind of vibe and let us roll with it, and it was just perfect.
I want to ask about Detroit as well. I always thought that you and B12 were making, and this might sound a bit ridiculous, but like a British take on Detroit techno. In that it was obviously Detroit influenced, but it wasn't like a copy, if you see what I mean. How do you think you kind of came to making that sound?
With me, it's a bit different. I would say some of the majority of the UK and European techno that looked towards Detroit was a kind of attempt at imitation at that time. It's just they couldn't, and it ended up sounding different, and UK and Europe bringing their own influences. And I think sometimes that's where that lack of the experience of a lot of the black music came in. The music tended to be more ambient and more geared towards familiar sort of European bands like Tangerine Dream influences and stuff like that. So it kind of, that side of it, whereas I brought my influences, which were a lot more niche, the soul and jazz influences. But the biggest way I was different, my career was different. Before I'd even released the record, I knew the guys from Detroit from record collecting and going over there. So I already had met Derek May, I'd already met Carl Craig, I'd already met most of them actually, Juan, Shake, I could name drop forever. I'd already met them before I started making music. So one of the nicest things Carl Craig's always said about me is it was a two-way street. He'd learn from me and I'd learn from him. And it was like that from the beginning, like I said, before I'd even released the record. So, you know, I'd be making music, and before it came out, I would send it to Derek and Carl, and they would, you know, critique it or whatever. And and then I even, you know, collaborated with Carl and Stacey Pullen. It didn't come out, but, you know, we'd get together when I'd go to Detroit. So I'd say it was more collaborative than imitative from my point of view. And, you know, straight away, my second release was released on Planet E. So immediately I had that, you know, kind of connection, and yeah, it went from there really.
Must have been pretty amazing for your second release to get signed to Planet E, you know, legendary label.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted it to come out on Retroactive because that was the label at the time, but Carl had plans for his own label, and so he was like, no, I've got this new imprint coming out called Planet E, and I'm like, and also, you know, Planet E, you know, sounded to me like a sort of reference to ecstasy, and it was like, I don't know, Carl. He was like, look, trust me, the first release is going to be amazing. It's a sort of mad mashup EP by myself. And when that came out, I was like, okay, Carl, yeah, fair enough. Put it out, have it on the second release as Planet E. It'd be amazing.
Hang on, the first release on Planet E, was that Bug in the Bass Bin or?
No, it was the EP he did where it's all sort of breaks and stuff. God, let me have a look, because I can't remember what moniker he did it under at the time. I'm just getting it up here digitally, so I'll be able to tell you. It was a play on the Jazz Funk Classics time, wasn't it?
Oh, the 6ix9ine release.
Yeah, was it by 6ix9ine? Yeah, that was the first Planet E release.
Right. Oh yeah, that's an amazing record. Yeah.
Yeah, and he did the pun on the Jazz Funk Classics. So yeah, it was great. And once I heard that, I was like, yeah, I'm fine. You know, have it come out on Planet E.
Did you? You must have been to some good parties in Detroit when you visited, no? Like.
Not really, no. When I went to Detroit, it wasn't like it is now. It was scary. It was dangerous. It wasn't, you know, you had none of the gentrification at all. It was still mostly, well, it's still a lot of it is burnt out, but it was completely bombed out. It was dangerous. You didn't really want to go out unless you were with people. And so, no, I didn't go clubbing at that time. The Music Institute had just stopped anyway. And when I was going to meet Carl, we just hang out instead, you know, or when I went to see one, I'd just go and ask them where the record shops were. And they were usually in places where you didn't want to go. You know, I remember Stacey had to take me, a guy, one time I found a record shop, probably one of the best ones, right? I got so much rare soul. And the guys behind the counter called me over and said, whatever you do not leave here until your ride picks you up, which was Stacey. And I'm like, why? You know, I could get a cab, and they said, no, there's a guy waiting for you outside. He's seen that you're buying a lot of records. He thinks you've got a lot of money on you. You know, he's going to hold you up. And they said, just stay in the shop. He won't come in here because we've got protection here, you know, behind the counter or whatever. And that was what it was like. It was no joke, you know. It was mad. And I'm sure the people who live in Detroit have got, you know, endless amount of stories. You know, when I used to see Carl and Kenny Larkin, you know, Kenny got shot at one of the, you know, at the time that I was going over there a lot. It was pretty dangerous. It's so much more different now. The fact that you can have a festival, you know, every year, it's just a miracle. It's just amazing the way it's turned around. And yeah, no, I would probably just go to some crazy out of the way bar with Carl and his ex-wife at the time, who was one of my best friends, and we just hang out, or Carl would take me to the cinema, you know, and that kind of vibe, really.
As an avid record collector and electro fan, was there a moment when you had to sort of get over the fact that you were, hanging out with Juan Atkins or something like that? I mean, someone who had made the greatest electro records of all time,
Yeah, it was a real thrill meeting Juan. But one of the great things about those guys, I mean, contrary to some of the things you hear about ego and stuff these days, I mean, would you let someone who just turned up on your doorstep come in while you're working, and just let you have around and look for your record collection? I think I'd tell someone to go piss off. But he was like, he wasn't happy about it. He was like, "Oh, come in, I'm trying to work, in his office." And he said, "There's some guys here who can help you out." And that's how I met Sheikh. And he showed us around. He said, "What you doing here?" And I said, "Derek told us where you all lived, and we're record buying." And he said, "Well, you can buy some records." Juan said, "You can buy some of my records if you want." So we just looked through his record collection, and bought some records. And it was really funny because Sheikh was going, "You can't have that one, I want that one." And I didn't know you had that one. And it was that kind of vibe. It wasn't like, "Who do you think you are? You have to set up a meeting to meet us." And it was completely down to earth. It's like a community of people. And then an English guy, Matt Cogger, who I got to be good friends with, he came downstairs. He was running Transmat's office at the time because Derek was always in Europe. And he took us around Detroit a bit as well, and we went out for something to eat. And it was that kind of vibe. So there wasn't a chance to be in awe of Juan because he hates that anyway. He would probably say, "Yeah, stop blowing smoke up my ass," or something if you tried to have that approach with him. So yeah, it was great.
You're listening to Radio Primavera Sound, proudly presented by Cupra.